On November 17, 1991, one of the world's most respected cave divers entered Indian Springs and never came out alive. Today we will be discussing the story of Parker Turner, a legendary cave diver, and the nightmare story that took place at Indian Springs. The caves are a terrifying place, one of great risk and danger. And tonight, a hidden force within the rock will decide fate. This is the story of Parker Turner. Please make sure to leave a like if you enjoy, and subscribe for more true cave exploration stories. His death was not the result of a simple mistake or equipment failure. The cause was something far more subtle, something invisible and insidious. It was a danger that had been hiding in plain sight, in the very air the divers exhaled. This is a story of how even the most experienced can fall victim to the unknown, and how a place of stunning beauty can become a tomb. To understand the tragedy at Indian Springs, you must first understand the man. Parker Turner was not an ordinary diver. He belonged to an elite class of underwater explorers, men and women who ventured into the last uncharted territories on Earth. He was a highly skilled technical cave diver, a master of a discipline that combines the precision of an astronaut with the courage of a mountaineer. Parker was more than just a diver. He was a cartographer of the underworld. He frequently collaborated with fellow experts on ambitious mapping and exploration projects, pushing the known boundaries of underwater caves. His approach to cave diving was defined by discipline, rigorous planning, and an almost obsessive focus on risk management. This wasn't just a hobby, it was a science. Every piece of equipment was checked, double-checked, and then checked again. Every potential failure point was identified, analyzed, and mitigated with a corresponding backup plan. This philosophy, born from hundreds of hours spent in the silent, unforgiving darkness, was the bedrock upon which his reputation was built. He understood that, in the labyrinthine passages beneath the earth, the diver's greatest enemy is not the cave itself, but human error. Complacency, overconfidence, and haste were luxuries that had no place in his world. He viewed each dive as a complex technical problem that required a carefully engineered solution. The solution wasn't just about getting in and out. It was about creating a wide margin of safety for every conceivable contingency. Gas management, for example, was not a matter of guesswork. It was governed by inviolable rules, like the rule of thirds. 1/3 of the gas supply for the journey in, 1/3 for the journey out, and a final third held in absolute reserve for emergencies. This principle, a cornerstone of safe cave diving, ensures that a diver always has enough breathing gas to get themselves and a distressed buddy back to the surface, even if a catastrophic failure occurs at the furthest point of penetration. In an environment where panic is a death sentence, Parker's calm and analytical mind was his primary survival tool. The human brain is not designed for the crushing pressure and absolute blackness of a flooded cave. The instinct to flee, to gasp for air, to struggle towards a surface that isn't there, can overwhelm even experienced divers. But a meticulously constructed dive plan acts as a powerful psychological anchor. By breaking the dive down into a series of manageable, predetermined steps, the mind remains focused on the immediate task, not the overwhelming scale of the danger. This mental discipline, the ability to suppress fear and adhere to the plan, is what separates survivors from statistics. He was known as a reliable and calm partner, someone you would want by your side when facing the inherent perils of the abyss. In technical diving, the buddy system transcends simple companionship. It is a pact of mutual survival. Each diver is responsible not only for their own safety, but for the life of their partner. This requires absolute trust, flawless communication through hand signals and light movements, and an intimate knowledge of each other's equipment and procedures. He and his partner for the day were a well-practiced team, their movements and checks a familiar, reassuring ritual. It was this very reputation for caution, this dedication to engineering solutions for every known risk, that made the events of November 17, 1991, so profoundly unsettling. When a diver who embodies the principles of safety and preparation fails to return, it sends a shockwave through the entire community. It forces everyone to confront a terrifying possibility. that there are dangers in the deep that no amount of planning can account for. The morning of November 17, 1991, broke over the Florida Panhandle with an air of quiet purpose. The air was cool, the sky clear, a perfect day for diving. At the entrance to Indian Springs, the atmosphere was one of focused professionalism. There was no bravado, only the quiet hum of preparation as the team assembled their complex life support systems. The objective was clear and ambitious: to conduct an advanced deep dive, pushing further into the explored sections of the colossal cave system. The plan was to follow the main guideline deep into the cave, to a depth of approximately 270 feet. From there, they would explore a specific side passage known as the Wakula Room, a vast chamber that promised new avenues for exploration. This wasn't a casual sightseeing trip. It was a mission with specific goals of survey and exploration, pushing the known boundaries of the system. This was not a journey for the faint of heart or the unprepared. It was a technical operation that required the precision of a surgeon and the resolve of an astronaut. The route would take them through constrictions, across vast, silent chambers, and into depths where the weight of the water above exerts a pressure of nearly 9 times that of the surface. At this depth, every movement is deliberate, every breath carefully controlled. To survive a journey into the deep zones of Indian Springs, a diver must carry their world with them. This means not just a single tank of air, but a sophisticated, redundant life support system. The core of this system is the twin set, 2 large cylinders mounted on the back, providing the primary breathing gas for the deepest part of the dive. But that is only the beginning. They were equipped with specialized gas mixes, using helium to combat the intoxicating effects of nitrogen at profound depths. Standard compressed air, which is 79% nitrogen, becomes a powerful narcotic under pressure. This nitrogen narcosis impairs judgment, slows reaction times, and can induce a dangerous sense of euphoria, a fatal combination in a cave. To counteract this, the nitrogen in their breathing gas was replaced with helium, creating a mixture known as trimix. Helium is an inert gas that does not have the same narcotic properties, allowing divers to maintain clear thought and motor control at depths that would be incapacitating on air. The dive was scheduled to last several hours, with the majority of that time spent on a slow, methodical ascent with multiple decompression stops. While helium solves the problem of narcosis, it, like nitrogen, dissolves into the body's tissues under pressure. Ascending too quickly would cause these dissolved gas molecules to come out of solution, forming bubbles inside the body, a painful and potentially lethal condition known as decompression sickness, or the bends. To prevent this, the ascent had to be painstakingly slow, with long pauses at specific depths. The plan called for the use of staged cylinders, extra tanks of decompression gases left at specific points along the guideline. These tanks contained different gas mixtures, typically with higher percentages of oxygen. Breathing these richer mixes during the shallow decompression stops helps to accelerate the off-gassing of inert helium and nitrogen from the body's tissues, significantly shortening the required decompression time. The divers would carry some of these cylinders with them and stage others along the guideline on the way in, retrieving them on their way out. Each cylinder was clearly labeled with its contents and maximum operating depth, a critical detail to prevent a diver from breathing a high oxygen mix at a depth where it would become toxic. Their only connection to the known world was a thin nylon line. This guideline is the single most important piece of safety equipment in a cave. It is the Ariadne's thread leading out of the labyrinth, in the complete absence of natural light, and with visibility that can be reduced to 0 in an instant by disturbed silt. This line is the only guaranteed path back to the surface. Losing the line is one of the most terrifying and deadly scenarios a cave diver can face, a situation that almost invariably ends in tragedy. The diver's hands would never be far from it, their movements practiced to ensure they never became separated from this vital link. The plan was robust. It was built on decades of collective experience and a deep, personal understanding of the risks involved. It accounted for equipment failure, gas emergencies, and medical issues. They had backup lights, backup masks, and redundant breathing systems. They had the training, the discipline, and the right mindset. As they exchanged a final calm nod at the water's edge, they believed they had an answer for every question the cave might ask of them. But the cave was about to pose a question no one had ever thought to consider. With a final meticulous check of their equipment, gauges monitored, regulators purged, lights confirmed, and a shared nod of silent understanding, Parker Turner and his dive partner slipped beneath the placid surface of Indian Springs. The transition was absolute. The warm Florida air gave way to the cool, 72-degree embrace of the aquifer. Sunlight, which had moments before dappled the surface, was now a rapidly shrinking emerald window, its light surrendering to the profound and ancient darkness of the cave system below. This was the point of commitment, the final threshold between the familiar world and the alien environment they had trained so rigorously to enter. Every breath was now a measured, deliberate act, a conscious consumption of the finite supply of gas they carried on their backs. The initial phase of the dive proceeded exactly as planned, a testament to their extensive preparation. They descended with practiced ease, their movements efficient and calm. Their powerful primary lights sliced through the inky blackness, revealing the limestone walls of the passage. They followed the permanent guideline, a thin nylon cord that serves as the sole lifeline back to the surface. This simple line is the most critical piece of safety equipment in a cave, the Ariadne's thread in a subterranean labyrinth where disorientation can be fatal. Their progress was steady, a rhythmic kick and glide, conserving both energy and gas as they penetrated deeper into the earth. They passed familiar landmarks and junctions, each one ticking off a mental checkbox in their meticulously rehearsed dive plan. After a descent that felt both timeless and precisely measured, they arrived at their destination. At a depth of 265 feet, they hovered weightlessly in a chamber of immense scale, an area of the cave few humans had ever witnessed. Here, the pressure is immense, nearly 9 times that of the surface. The water, once clear, now held a fine suspension of silt, a ghostly haze that softened the edges of their light beams. The trimix gas they breathed, a carefully calculated blend of oxygen, helium, and nitrogen, kept their minds clear, warding off the debilitating effects of nitrogen narcosis that would be overwhelming at this depth on standard air. This was the pinnacle of their exploration, a moment of profound isolation and discovery in a place of humbling, geological grandeur. Adhering to the rigid discipline of technical diving, they reached the planned turning point of their dive. This moment is not determined by curiosity or ambition, but by the cold, hard logic of gas management. The rule of thirds dictates that 1/3 of the gas supply is for the journey in, 1/3 is for the journey out, and the final third is held in reserve for emergencies. Parker's partner signaled, and Parker confirmed. They had reached their limit. It was the moment when they would end their inward journey and begin the long, slow trip home. As they began their exit, turning to retrace their path along the guideline, their mood would have been one of focused satisfaction. The dive had gone perfectly so far. They had reached their objective, their equipment was functioning flawlessly, and their gas consumption was right on schedule. The most challenging part of the penetration was complete. Now began the equally critical and often more dangerous phase of the dive. The ascent, a multi-hour process of slow stage decompression, stops that would allow the inert gases absorbed by their bodies under pressure to safely dissipate. It was during this exit phase, just minutes after turning back, that the unthinkable happened. Without any warning, no tremor, no audible groan from the rock, a massive section of the limestone ceiling directly between the two divers gave way. A violent, explosive concussion of water and energy tore through the passage. The stable, silent world of the cave was instantaneously transformed into a maelstrom of churning silt, rock, and debris. The collapse was not a gentle crumbling, but a catastrophic failure of the cave's structure, releasing immense stored energy in a fraction of a second. Parker's partner had been swimming just ahead, leading the exit. The powerful shockwave from the implosion threw him forward. He fought to control his buoyancy and orientation, turning back to find his partner. But the passage behind him was gone. Where his friend had been moments before, there was now only a roiling, opaque cloud of silt so thick that even the most powerful dive light could not penetrate it. The guideline, their connection to each other and to the surface, was severed, buried somewhere within the chaos. As the silt began to settle, the horrifying reality became clear. Where there had once been an open tunnel, there was now only a solid wall of freshly fallen rock and debris, a tombstone of limestone sealing the passage completely. The collapse had been total. Parker was trapped on the other side, cut off from the only way out. For his partner, hovering in the dark water, the sight was incomprehensible. The mental map of the cave, so carefully memorized, was now useless. The path home had vanished. His partner, faced with a horrific choice, knew there was nothing he could do. Attempting to dig through the tons of rock was impossible and would only be a suicidal act. His own survival now depended on immediate action. With a dwindling gas supply, a long decompression obligation, and the psychological trauma of what he had just witnessed, he had to make the loneliest journey of his life, to exit for help, knowing it was already too late. The collapse had not just trapped Parker, it had made any potential rescue impossible. Within hours, some of the world's most elite cave rescue divers were on site, descending into the spring in a desperate bid to reach Turner. But their efforts only confirmed the grim reality. When they reached the collapse zone, their powerful lights illuminated a scene of absolute finality. The passage was completely and irrevocably blocked by a mountain of rock and silt. There was no gap, no side passage, no way through. Parker Turner was beyond reach, entombed within the silent heart of the mountain. In the aftermath of the tragedy, a haunting question echoed through the stunned cave diving community. How could this have happened? In a discipline defined by meticulous planning, redundancy, and a deep respect for known hazards, a cave simply falling from the ceiling seemed like an impossible, almost supernatural event. It defied the established risk calculus that every diver lived by. There was no equipment malfunction, no procedural error, no sign of human mistake. The environment itself had failed. The search for answers became an urgent obsession, a mission to reclaim a sense of order from the chaos. Investigators, geologists, and the most experienced divers in the world began to scrutinize every detail of the incident, looking for a rational explanation for what seemed utterly irrational. The investigation began not with complex geology or advanced physics, but with a simple, observable fact of every dive. Every time a diver exhales, a stream of bubbles is released. In the open ocean, these bubbles rise to the surface and vanish, insignificant and forgotten. But in the enclosed, overhead environment of a cave, they behave very differently. Investigators, having ruled out all other conventional causes, were forced to consider the unconventional. They turned their attention to the only foreign element that divers consistently introduce into the cave system: their own breath. Could something as seemingly harmless as a bubble be a clue to a catastrophe? Inside a cave, the journey of an exhaled bubble is cut short. They travel upwards until they hit the solid limestone ceiling. This ceiling, however, is not a perfectly smooth surface. It is a complex, irregular landscape of pockets, crevices, and solution tubes carved by water over millennia. The bubbles, naturally seeking the highest point, migrate into these imperfections and become trapped. In the still, current-free water of the cave, they have nowhere else to go. They collect, coalesce, and form larger and larger pockets of air, perched against the rock, hidden from view. Investigators then considered the specific location of the collapse. It wasn't in a random, seldom visited passage. It was in a section of the cave that lay directly beneath a common decompression stop zone. This was a critical clue. Decompression stops are not optional. They are a mandatory safety procedure on deep dives, allowing the body to safely off-gas absorbed nitrogen. Divers must remain stationary at specific depths for set periods. For convenience and safety, these stops are almost always performed in the same locations: wide, stable areas of the cave near the exit. This meant that for years, dozens, if not hundreds of divers, had been pausing and breathing in the exact same spot. Over the course of hundreds of dives, this meant that one specific area of the ceiling was being subjected to a constant, concentrated barrage of exhaled air. Each diver, spending minutes or even hours decompressing, would contribute their bubbles to the same collection points in the ceiling above. What was a negligible amount from a single dive became a significant volume when multiplied over years of intense diving activity. The air wasn't just passing through, it was accumulating, creating a substantial, permanent air pocket within the rock structure, growing larger with every team that passed through. To understand why this matters, one must understand the natural state of a flooded cave. It exists in a delicate state of equilibrium. The immense weight of the overlying rock is partially supported by the water that fills the cave. This water isn't just in the main chamber, it permeates the entire rock mass, filling every tiny crack and fissure. This water provides hydrostatic support. Because water is virtually incompressible, it acts like a liquid scaffold, pushing back against the force of gravity and helping to hold the ceiling up. When a bubble of exhaled air rises and enters one of these cracks, it displaces the water. The equilibrium is disturbed. Where there was once heavy, supportive, incompressible water, there is now light, compressible air. This fundamentally alters the physics of the structure. The liquid scaffold is gone, replaced by a pocket of gas that offers no structural support. The weight of the rock that was once borne by the water is now hanging, unsupported. But the trapped air does more than simply remove support. It introduces a new, active force into the equation. The trapped air is buoyant. It wants to rise. This creates a constant, upward pressure on the rock above it, effectively trying to lift a piece of the ceiling away from the main rock mass. The rock is now being subjected to two opposing forces, the downward pull of gravity on its own unsupported weight and the upward prying force of the buoyant air pocket. A subtle yet relentless tug-of-war was taking place deep within the stone. The final piece of the puzzle was chemical. The exhaled air, rich in carbon dioxide, creates a highly corrosive environment when trapped against limestone. The interface between the trapped air, the water and the rock becomes a zone of accelerated chemical weathering. Carbon dioxide dissolves in the water to form carbonic acid, which aggressively eats away at the calcium carbonate in the limestone. This process, known as solution weathering, was happening not on the surface of the cave, but deep inside the cracks. The stone begins to rot from within, its structural integrity silently compromised. These interconnected processes, the removal of hydrostatic support, the introduction of buoyant lift, and the accelerated internal erosion, formed the genesis of a radical new idea. It was a theory that explained how the actions of divers themselves, over many years, could inadvertently weaponize their own breath against the cave. This was the bubble-induced collapse theory. The theory explained the most terrifying aspect of the incident: why the collapse happened without warning. The weakening process was entirely internal and invisible. From the outside, the ceiling looked as solid and stable as it had for centuries. But inside, it was being hollowed out, weakened, and primed for failure. It was a geological time bomb, waiting for one final tiny push. Perhaps the pressure wave from a passing diver, or even the addition of just one more bubble to trigger a catastrophic, instantaneous failure. The rock didn't just fall, it shattered. The equilibrium was broken, and the cave reclaimed its passage in a violent, sudden convulsion. The news that the rescue attempt had failed sent a wave of devastation through the global cave diving community. Parker Turner was not just another diver. He was an icon. If this could happen to Parker, then no one was safe. The impossibility of recovering Parker's body added another layer of pain. Indian Springs, the site of so many explorations, had become his final resting place. The shock and grief quickly galvanized into a movement for change. The bubble-induced collapse theory was a watershed moment. The most immediate change was a new and intense focus on bubble management. Divers were now taught to be acutely aware of where their bubbles were going. This new awareness of ceiling stability became a critical part of dive planning. Parker Turner's death, as tragic as it was, became a catalyst for one of the most significant safety advancements in the history of technical diving. Indian Springs remains restricted, its reputation as one of the most dangerous caves in the world cemented by the 1991 tragedy. The story of Parker Turner is a descent into a place of profound darkness, where the laws of physics run their course. The abyss is impartial. It does not recognize skill, courage, or experience. In a place where light never reaches, even the smallest mistake, or the smallest bubble, can be fatal.
The date was May 28, 1973. It happened in the quiet farmlands of South Australia, near the town of Mount Gambier. A small group of friends prepared for an adventure. They were scuba divers, drawn to the region's unique geology. The area was a limestone landscape, dotted with water-filled sinkholes. For divers, these were portals to another world. The water was crystal clear. They opened into monumental chambers. It was silent, untouched beauty. One sinkhole stood out, the shaft. A thrilling technical dive, a challenge they felt ready for. Their plan seemed straightforward. They would descend into the sinkhole, then explore the vast main chamber and return to the surface before their air ran low. The group consisted of 4 members: Stephen L. Millett, Christine M. Millett, Gordon G. Roberts, and John H. Bockerman, part of a larger expedition. These 4 would dive together. They checked their regulators, strapped on heavy steel tanks. They walked to the sinkhole's tiny 1-meter opening. This was cave diving in extreme danger. Below the surface, the rules change completely. There is no quick escape to the air above. The only way out is the way you came in. Twisting, submerged passages. Darkness broken only by a fragile beam of light. Getting lost is not an inconvenience, it is a death sentence. Every decision hundreds of feet down carries immense weight. The 4 slipped one by one through the narrow opening and disappeared into the water. Friends on the surface waited and watched the clock. Minutes became an hour, then longer. A dreadful silence settled. The bubbles stopped rising. The 4 who entered the shaft did not come back. A routine weekend dive turned into a desperate puzzle and a complex, tragic recovery. What happened inside that dark, watery tomb? Want the full truth? Tap to subscribe now and get gripping exploration stories every week. The Mount Gambier region is a magnet for explorers. The surface a quilt of rolling paddocks, the ground beneath a labyrinth shaped by water and time. Here, limestone rules the landscape. Over millennia, slightly acidic rain has seeped through this porous rock, dissolving, widening, and stitching together a vast network of caves, tunnels, and caverns. When a chamber roof collapsed, a sinkhole was born, one of many natural wells puncturing the earth, some filled with water of astonishing clarity. Among them, the shaft held a special mystique. On bright days, a single beam of sunlight spears the surface opening and plunges into darkness below, turning the main chamber into a natural stage. Scale completes the spell. The primary cavern measures approximately 140 meters long and 80 meters wide, an immense bell-shaped room where light and distance play tricks on the mind. In the early 1970s, this frontier was only beginning to open. A new breed of adventurer, armed with scuba gear and curiosity, arrived to test boundaries once thought unreachable. They came for the ethereal vision, the spotlight beam, the cathedral silence, the sense of floating in a world frozen in geological time. Yet the beauty masks an unforgiving danger. Some tunnels in the shaft descend to over 120 meters, depths that magnify every mistake. At such depths, the gas a diver breathes becomes part of the hazard. Nitrogen narcosis, sometimes called the rapture of the deep, blurs judgment, slows thought, and erodes fine motor control. Euphoria can feel like confidence. In caves, that illusion is costly. Decisions that must be precise become dangerously approximate. Still, the draw was irresistible. An ultimate dive, a place of profound beauty and significant technical challenge, where skill and restraint mattered as much as bravery. The lesson, even then, was clear for those who noticed it. The deeper the temptation, the narrower the margin. Guidelines, gas discipline, and conservative plans are not optional in a place like this. And yet, in May of 1973, the allure of the shaft, its light, its silence, its vastness, would draw 4 divers into a story whose consequences reshaped the sport. The group that gathered at the shaft on that fateful May morning was bound by a shared passion for underwater exploration. At its heart was Stephen L. Millot, 30, Christine M. Millot, 26. Stephen was a respected and experienced diver from Adelaide. Known for his methodical approach and his deep fascination with South Australia's submerged cave systems. He had logged hundreds of hours underwater and was a prominent figure in the local diving community. Christine shared his adventurous spirit, often joining him on expeditions. Together, they formed a dedicated team drawn to the silent, otherworldly beauty beneath the Earth's surface. They were not reckless thrill seekers. They were serious hobbyists, captivated by a challenging and rewarding pursuit. Joining the Millots were Gordon G. Roberts, 28, John H. Bockerman, 32. Roberts, an engineer by trade, was a seasoned diver who explored the region's complex sinkholes. He was known for his calm demeanor and technical competence. Bockerman, a schoolteacher, was equally enthusiastic, though slightly less experienced in extreme caves. He was eager to push his boundaries and tackle the shaft. The 4 represented a cross-section of the burgeoning Australian diving scene. Professionals, passionate amateurs. Their friendship extended beyond the water's edge. They were part of a close-knit community, spending weekends traveling to remote locations, sharing knowledge, planning their next subterranean adventure. This camaraderie was essential. Cave diving demands absolute trust in your partners. Your life is quite literally in their hands, and theirs is in yours. The bond between these 4 was built on mutual reliance and a collective dream of exploring vast, uncharted underwater passages. Their expedition to the shaft was the culmination of shared ambition, a goal they had discussed and looked forward to for some time. On that day, they were part of a larger party of 10 divers from Adelaide. Some members were designated for support. Others planned less ambitious dives. The team of 4, Stephen, Christine, Gordon, and John, were set to tackle the main event. They were considered the most capable and prepared for the dive's primary objective: to explore the majestic main chamber of the shaft. Their experience gave them a sense of confidence. But the line between confidence and overconfidence is dangerously thin. They believed they were ready and prepared for known challenges. Yet they were tragically unaware of how quickly the situation could unravel. In the early 1970s, the Mount Gambier region was the undisputed epicenter of Australian cave diving. It was a wild frontier, attracting divers with its unparalleled density of world-class sites. Piccaninny Ponds, with its chasm of filtered seawater, Ewan's Ponds, a series of crystal-clear springs, but for the more technically minded, the deeper, darker caves held the greatest appeal. These sites offered a raw, unfiltered form of exploration. The culture was one of discovery and bravado, divers often competing to see who could go deeper or explore a new passage further. It was a thrilling but hazardous era. This period is often referred to as the pioneering days of cave diving. Formal training agencies with standardized safety protocols had not yet been firmly established. Knowledge was passed down from diver to diver, often through an informal system of mentorship. Techniques were learned through trial and error, a process that carried immense risk. Divers were pushing the limits of their equipment and their own physiological endurance. The period between 1970 and 1974 was particularly grim. It was marked by a string of fatalities in the region's sinkholes, as the sport's popularity outpaced safety measures. The atmosphere among the diving community was one of immense freedom and self-reliance. There were few rules and even fewer restrictions. If you had the gear and the nerve, you could attempt almost any dive. This lack of regulation fostered a spirit of adventure, but it also created a dangerous environment where inexperience could have fatal consequences. Divers often ventured into complex overhead environments with little more than open water skills, guideline use, gas management for deep dives, emergency procedures. Despite the known risks, the allure of Mount Gambier's caves was irresistible. The shaft was a crown jewel, a sight spoken of in hushed, reverent tones. It was a rite of passage for serious divers. Successfully navigating its depths was a badge of honor. The 4 divers who perished were products of this very culture. They were daring, competent, and deeply embedded in a community that celebrated pushing boundaries. They approached the shaft with the confidence of their peers, ready to add their names to the short list of those who had witnessed its subterranean splendor and returned to tell the tale. Section 3. The Anatomy of a Killer Cave. The shaft is a geological marvel, but its unique structure makes it exceptionally treacherous. From the surface, it looks deceptively simple, a narrow man-made hole about 1 meter in diameter in a farmer's field. This tight restriction is the only way in and the only way out. Divers must descend one at a time through this tube for roughly 7 meters. Then the cave opens up dramatically. Divers emerge into a colossal bell-shaped chamber, where their lights often don't reach the far walls. The main chamber measures roughly 140 meters by 80 meters. Its ceiling is a gently sloping dome of rock. The volume is disorienting. In gin-clear water, divers feel like they're floating in an endless void with few visual references. This is the first major danger: spatial disorientation. Without a continuous guideline, finding the small exit hole in the dark ceiling is like finding a needle in a haystack, especially if visibility is compromised, or if a diver is suffering from narcosis. At the bottom, around 36 meters deep, lies a massive chaotic rock pile from a ceiling collapse. From the rock pile's edges, darker tunnels lead deeper into the system. One known tunnel plunges to about 124 meters. That extreme depth is the second major hazard. It exponentially increases air consumption. It shortens no decompression limits. It guarantees the onset of severe nitrogen narcosis. Narcosis can impair a diver's judgment. It can damage their reasoning. It can wreck their motor skills when it matters most. The cave's final deadly feature is the risk of silt-outs. The floor and tunnels are coated in fine silt and clay. A misplaced fin kick can stir it. A hand brushing the floor can stir it. Exhaust bubbles from a regulator can stir it. In seconds, perfect visibility drops to 0 in a blinding cloud. A diver who loses their guideline in a silt-out is blindfolded in a maze. A single tiny exit, a vast, disorienting main chamber, extreme depth, and the risk of silt-outs together make the shaft unforgivingly complex. Section 5. The Final Plan. A Fatal Underestimation. The plan for the dive on May 28, 1973, was ambitious in the divers' minds, ambitious but achievable. Their primary goal was to descend into the shaft and explore the vast main chamber, and eventually drop down to the rock pile at the bottom depth, 36 meters, 120 feet. Swim the perimeter and truly take in the chamber's immense scale. Their plan hinged on the shaft of light from the entrance as the primary navigation for ascent. Keep the faint glow in sight, find the exit tube. This reliance on ambient light was their first critical miscalculation. Effectiveness of the beam depended on time of day and surface weather. On an overcast day, or as the sun moved across the sky, the beam could go dim, become diffuse, or disappear entirely. From the far corners of the 140-meter chamber, the small entrance would be nearly impossible to spot. They didn't account for becoming disoriented in sheer blackness far from the beacon of daylight. Second major flaw: no continuous guideline from the surface. A guideline is a diver's lifeline. A tactile connection to the outside world can be followed by hand even in total silt-out. They carried a reel meant for side passages, not the primary route. This choice reflected the era's cavalier attitude towards safety. They substituted a foolproof tool with their confidence a gamble in a place that punishes hubris. They underestimated compounding effects of depth narcosis and disorientation. 36 meters was deep enough for significant nitrogen narcosis to set in, impairing the judgment needed to execute their plan. They didn't appreciate how quickly cognition could degrade. Monitoring air levels becomes a challenge, remembering the way back becomes impossible. Their plan relied on best-case scenarios with no robust contingencies. They stepped off a cliff, confident they'd fly without realizing they had no wings. The entry to the shaft isn't a doorway, it's a decision. Feet first, one by one, the team slides into a 1-meter tube of limestone and shadow. Sound narrows to breath and bubbles. Rock presses close. There is no turning around. 7 meters down, the chimney opens, and the world falls away. Light from above blurs into a pale coin. The cave swallows the rest. They hover beneath the entrance, check signals, steady nerves. Then, commit. Off the ledge, into black water, 4 beams pushing a ceiling of night. From this point, the rules change. Air is math. Distance lies. Confidence is not a plan. They are inside the shaft now, past the last easy exit, descending toward consequences. Emerging, the world transformed. They left the passage and entered the staggering void of the main chamber, like stepping off a cliff into deep space. Below, the water was so clear they seemed suspended in air. Their dive lights cut through darkness. The beams struggled to find wall or floor, revealing the cavern's mind-boggling scale. They regrouped just below the entrance, treading in an immense, silent cathedral of rock and water, their bubbles the only sound. Here, just below the surface, they made their final decision. The plan: descend without a primary guideline. Rely on the column of light from the entrance to find the way back. Looking up, the opening was a brilliant, shimmering disk, a seemingly foolproof beacon. But that beacon would quickly shrink and dim, and could be lost if they strayed to the chamber's far edges. They trusted their eyes and their internal compass, foregoing the one tool that could guide them home by touch. With a shared signal, the team began their descent. 4 cohesive points of light moving down into blackness. Their initial path was vertical, aimed at the massive rock pile below. Air in their tanks compressed as pressure rose. They adjusted buoyancy, venting air to keep a steady, controlled drop. At this stage, everything seemed to be going to plan. They descended into the heart of one of Australia's most spectacular underwater landmarks, unaware their simple plan was already beginning to unravel. The journey downward into the shaft's main chamber is a slow-motion fall through inner space. As the 4 divers descended, the bright circle of the entrance above them shrank with every meter. A brilliant gateway at 10 meters, a distant star at 20, a faint ghostly glow at 30. Their world was defined by the intersecting beams of their dive lights. Those beams illuminated a swirling galaxy of tiny suspended particles. The rock walls remained tantalizingly out of reach. No sense of speed or position. It was profoundly disorienting. Up and down the only reliable directions. Passing the 30-meter mark, the floor began to materialize below them. Not a flat sandy bottom, but a colossal, chaotic mound of boulders and rubble. The remnants of the ancient ceiling collapsed that created the sinkhole. The rock pile rose up from the depths, a rugged alien landscape. Their plan reached that feature at about 36 meters, 120 feet, as their primary reference. From there, swim a circuit around the base, explore the perimeter, then begin ascent. The rock pile was the destination, the turning point of their dive. But the environment posed a hidden threat: silt. The rocks and floor were coated in a fine, powdery layer of clay and decomposed organic matter, a single, careless fin kick, the downward thrust of a hand used for stabilization, even the powerful exhaust from their regulators. Once disturbed, the silt would billow into an impenetrable milky cloud, visibility from 30 meters to 0 in seconds. As the team reached the rock pile, they would have been acutely aware of this danger. Experienced divers use precise buoyancy control and gentle, modified kicking techniques to avoid stirring up the bottom. But at this depth, another factor was beginning to take hold: the increased partial pressure of nitrogen. It was starting to affect their central nervous systems. Coordination slightly off, thought processes a little slower. Fine motor control needed to navigate a silty environment was already becoming compromised. So that was where things were heading. Upon reaching the rock pile at the bottom of the main chamber, the divers were presented with a choice. Their original plan was to explore the perimeter at this level, a depth of roughly 36 meters. This was already a deep dive by the standards of the day. But from the edges of the rock pile, tempting, darker openings beckoned. These were entrances to deeper tunnels, passages that led down into the unexplored abyss. For explorers like Stephen Millett, the promise of seeing something no one had ever seen was powerful. It appears the team deviated from their plan. Instead of staying in the relative safety of the main chamber, at least two divers, Stephen Millett and John Bockerman, decided to venture deeper. They swam away from the rock pile into a descending tunnel. The decision dramatically increased the risk. They entered a confined overhead environment. They were plunging beyond their intended limit. Every meter down increased their air consumption. It intensified nitrogen narcosis. Two divers, Christine Millett and Gordon Roberts, stayed near the top of the rock pile. The team was now split. That separation was a critical failure in protocol. A fundamental rule is to stay together as a team. By separating, they lost the ability to monitor each other's gas supply and location. They were 4 individuals instead of one supportive unit. As Millett and Bockerman pushed deeper, they chased a deadly siren's call. The tunnel sloped down steeply. Depth climbed fast. At depths approaching 60 meters and beyond, severe nitrogen narcosis would set in. Perception of time distorted. Clear, rational thought compromised. They kept consuming gas at an alarming rate, while their minds lured them ever deeper into the earth. The first tangible sign that something had gone terribly wrong was likely a sudden and catastrophic loss of visibility. Inside the tunnel were Stephen Millett and John Bockerman. As they began their ascent through the deep tunnel, their movements and the powerful exhaust bubbles from their regulators would have dislodged decades of accumulated silt from the ceiling and floor. The fine sediment would have instantly exploded into a blinding cloud, engulfing them in a thick brownout. One moment they were in clear water, the next they were in a dark, suffocating fog, unable to see their own hands, unable to see their gauges or each other. They were now blind and lost in a maze. In a zero-visibility silt-out, a cave diver's only hope is a continuous guideline leading to the exit. Without one, panic is almost inevitable. Disoriented and with their judgment already severely impaired by narcosis, Millett and Bockerman would have struggled to find their way back to the main chamber. Every frantic movement only made the silt-out worse. They were burning through their remaining air supply at an accelerated rate, their bodies fueled by adrenaline and fear. The precious minutes they had left were ticking away with terrifying speed as they fought against the blinding, choking darkness. Back in the main chamber, Christine Millett and Gordon Roberts would have seen the billowing cloud of silt pouring out of the tunnel entrance. This was a clear and horrifying signal of distress. They knew their partners were in that tunnel. Their immediate instinct might have been to help, but the situation was perilous. Entering a silt-out to find a lost diver is one of the most dangerous actions in cave diving, often leading to more fatalities. They were faced with an impossible choice: attempt a risky rescue with their own air supplies running low, or ascend to safety and leave their friends behind. As the silt cloud spread, it began to contaminate visibility in the entire lower section of the main chamber. The faint light from the surface, their only landmark, would have been completely obscured. Now all 4 divers were in jeopardy. Christine and Gordon, waiting in the increasingly murky water, were also at risk of becoming disoriented. The path back to the entrance tube, which had seemed so obvious on the way down, was now lost in the spreading gloom. The chain reaction had begun. A single misstep, disturbing the silt, had triggered a cascade of failures that was rapidly closing off every possible route of escape. As their air gauges dipped into the red and then fell to 0, the final moments for the divers would have been terrifying. The official cause of death for all 4 was drowning, a simple and stark conclusion to a complex series of events. This means they ran out of breathable air while still deep underwater, with no chance of reaching the surface. For Stephen Millett, for John Bockerman, both were deeper and likely ran out of air first, their end coming within the dark, silty confines of the cave system. The last sensation would have been the desperate, useless effort to draw a breath from an empty tank, followed by the body's involuntary, agonizing reflex to breathe water. The evidence suggests that the divers did not all perish in the same location, indicating a scattered and frantic final struggle. John Bockerman had pushed the deepest and was found far from the others. He may have become completely lost in the deeper tunnel system. Stephen Millett was found much shallower. He likely escaped the initial silt-out and swam upwards, fighting, but his air was exhausted before he reached the surface. His final moments were a race against time that he tragically lost. For Christine Millett, for Gordon Roberts. Both had been waiting in the main chamber and faced an equally grim fate. Evidence suggests they stayed together until the very end. They likely searched for the exit in the murky water until their own air was depleted. Their final moments were together, not solitary, in the silent, cold darkness of the chamber. The psychological impact of nitrogen narcosis cannot be overstated. It impairs judgment and can create a strange detachment or confusion. Some survivors describe puzzlement rather than outright panic, a dreamlike state where urgency doesn't fully register. We cannot know their thoughts, but it's likely their minds were not their own. They were victims not just of the cave and a lack of air, but of the profound, deadly treachery of the deep. Back at the entrance to the shaft, the mood among the remaining members shifted slowly from patient anticipation to a gnawing anxiety. They had watched their four friends descend with excitement, fully expecting them to surface within the planned dive time around 30 to 40 minutes. As the 1-hour mark came and went, conversations dwindled. All eyes were fixed on the small, dark pool of water in the center of the entrance tube. They watched for the telltale sign of ascending divers, the shimmering disturbance of exhaled bubbles breaking the surface. But the water remained unnervingly still. The silence from below was absolute and deeply unsettling. As more time passed, the grim reality began to dawn on them. A delay of a few minutes could be explained by an interesting discovery or a minor equipment issue. A delay of over an hour for 4 divers on single tanks could mean only one thing. They were in trouble. The support divers on the surface were experienced enough to know the harsh mathematics of air consumption at depth. They knew that the team's air supply would have been long gone. A sense of helplessness descended upon the group. They were standing just meters away from their friends, separated by a vertical wall of water and rock, completely powerless to help. The recovery operation began almost immediately, drawing in some of the most experienced cave divers in Australia. The divers descended into the gloomy silence of the shaft, their powerful lights cutting through the water, searching for any sign of their missing colleagues. The first discovery was made relatively quickly and at a surprisingly shallow depth. The body of Stephen L. Millett was found at a depth of approximately 15 meters, around 50 feet. He was located under a large sloping rock ledge, not far from the direct ascent line to the entrance. This location told a heartbreaking story. It confirmed that Stephen had managed to escape the deeper parts of the cave and was on his way to the surface. He was agonizingly close to safety, just a few minutes swim from the air, but his tank was empty. He had run out of time and air, and his body had come to rest under the overhang during its final, uncontrolled descent after he drowned. This initial finding provided a crucial piece of the puzzle, but it also deepened the mystery of the other 3 divers. Stephen's shallow location suggested a frantic and desperate final ascent, but the whereabouts of his wife, his friend Gordon Roberts, and John Bockerman remained unknown. The recovery team continued their search, meticulously sweeping the vast chamber with their lights. The scale of the cavern made the task incredibly difficult. It was like searching a football field at night with only a flashlight. The divers had to be methodical, moving in careful patterns to ensure no area was missed, all while managing their own gas supplies and depth. The subsequent dives on that first day yielded no further results. The silt that had been kicked up during the incident had settled to some degree, but the water in the lower sections of the chamber remained murky, hampering the search efforts. The recovery divers returned to the surface with the grim news that only one of the victims had been located. It was clear that this was going to be a prolonged and highly complex operation. The remaining 3 divers were somewhere in the immense dark void below. Finding them would require a series of dives, deep, dangerous, emotionally draining, into the heart of the killer cave. The tragedy at the shaft sent a powerful shockwave through the global diving community, but its impact was most profoundly felt in Australia. The loss of 4 divers in a single incident was a brutal wake-up call, forcing a painful and long overdue reckoning with the sport's cavalier attitude towards safety. The pioneering era of trial and error was over, its devastating cost laid bare. In September 1973, just 4 months after the accident, the Cave Divers Association of Australia, the CDAA, was formed. The organization was founded by a group of senior divers, including many who were involved in the recovery efforts at the shaft. Their mission was clear: to prevent a similar tragedy from ever happening again. The CDAA introduced several key safety principles that are now considered fundamental to modern cave diving. The foremost of these was the non-negotiable rule of using a continuous guideline. They also formalized the rule of thirds for gas management and a rigorous, tiered training system. The association also took on the role of managing access to the sensitive cave sites. The formation of the CDAA marked a fundamental shift in the culture of Australian cave diving, moving from a focus on bravado and depth to a new ethos centered on discipline, training, knowledge, and an unwavering respect for the unforgiving nature of the underwater cave environment. The tragic events of May 28, 1973, cast a long and dark shadow over the world of cave diving. But from that darkness, a powerful light of change emerged. The deaths of Stephen Millott, Christine Millott, Gordon Roberts, and John Bockerman were not just a grim statistic. They became a foundational moment. Their story served as a brutal and undeniable lesson written in the cold, silent depths of the shaft. It forced a generation of divers to confront the lethal gap between their ambitions and their capabilities, highlighting the catastrophic consequences of inadequate training, flawed planning, and an over-reliance on confidence instead of proven safety protocols. The loss was immense, but the legacy it created has been profoundly life-saving. The principles it established, the mandatory use of a continuous guideline, the strict adherence to gas management rules like the rule of thirds, and a rigorous tiered training system, have become the bedrock of safe cave diving worldwide. These rules were not arbitrary. Each one was a direct response to a specific failure that occurred inside the shaft, making them a living memorial to the 4 divers who perished. The allure of places like the shaft remains as potent as ever. The silent, weightless flight through a subterranean cathedral of crystal-clear water, lit by the ethereal beam of a diver's light, is an experience that transcends simple sport. It is a journey into a geological time capsule, a world of profound and ancient beauty that reminds us how much of our own planet remains a mystery. The memory of Stephen, Christine, Gordon, and John endures as both a tribute and a solemn warning. By learning from their tragedy, we honor their adventurous spirit. We ensure that those who follow them into the darkness do so with the wisdom and the tools needed to return safely to the light, carrying with them new stories and new knowledge from the last truly uncharted places on Earth. Love real survival and exploration? Subscribe now. Never miss a story.
Mayday. Mayday. This is Vortex Base. We have a lost diver. Repeat. Lost diver in Chamber 3. The voice crackled through the small receiver, thin and strained against a backdrop of static that sounded like falling rain. It was a voice stripped of all but its essential purpose, a sharp point of human distress piercing the calm of the afternoon. The man on the other end spoke quickly, his words clipped, as if he were trying to outrun the very news he was delivering. Each syllable was heavy with a dread that had been building for hours, a slow-burning fear that had finally erupted into this formal plea for help, a signal sent out from a remote patch of wooded Florida scrubland into the wider world. The radio was small, the voice was sharp. It sounded like a man who had not slept. His name was Ben. He was 31. He liked the cold water deep rock. He was not a reckless thrill-seeker, a meticulous, passionate explorer of the Earth's hidden corners. For Ben, cave diving was a discipline, a form of meditation that demanded total focus. It rewarded him with sights few would ever witness. He had done many dives, logging hundreds of hours in the flooded labyrinths of Florida in Mexico. He knew caves, he knew risk. He had friends who trusted him implicitly, friends who were now standing on the surface, their trust helpless against the unyielding physics of the situation. He double-checked his gear. He planned his gas mix with scientific precision. He always respected the cave. The cave was a sink, part of the vast Floridan aquifer. Thin tunnels, restrictions, and wide cathedral-like rooms called chambers. Light could not get in. Only divers with powerful lamps could see. Ben had driven out that morning with 2 partners. The plan: a reconnaissance into Chamber 3 to survey a newly discovered side passage. Well within his capabilities. Cave diving is like entering another world, a realm governed by its own unforgiving laws. You must plan for every contingency. You must carry your air in redundant tanks on your back, because the surface is not up, but back the way you came. You must carry a primary light on your head, and at least 2 backups. Most importantly, you must carry a line, a simple nylon string, usually white or yellow, tied off securely at the entrance. You unspool it as you go, creating a continuous, tangible path that guarantees you can find your way back out, even in 0 visibility. If you lose the line, you can get lost. Ben tied the line and went in. The transition from the sunlit world to the subterranean one was immediate. The water temperature dropped, and the ambient sounds of the forest gave way to the rhythmic hiss of his regulator and the soft flutter of his own bubbles. He moved slowly, deliberately, small efficient fin movements to avoid silt. He checked air, depth, time. A practiced glance every few minutes. His beam cut a cone of clarity, revealing strange rock, ancient fossils, and the ghostly white of his guideline stretching ahead. He took photos, the alien beauty of the passage. He loved the profound quiet, the feeling of being utterly alone, yet connected to deep time. His friends stayed outside. They watched his rope, the primary safety line slowly unspooling from a large reel. The sky changed. High, thin clouds thickened and darkened, coalescing into a heavy, bruised mass. Rain began, a spatter, then a steady downpour. They did not know how much water would come, or how quickly it would alter the cave's delicate hydrology. Rain percolates rapidly through porous limestone, spiking flow inside a cave. The flow can change direction. It can push a diver, stir silt, hide the line. In minutes, a calm system can become a blind maze. Ben reached a deep room known as Chamber 3, a vast silent space the size of a small church, its ceiling lost in the blackness. He saw it, the small, keyhole-shaped tunnel he had come to explore. He had ample air. He had time. He secured his primary reel and switched to a smaller spool for the push. Then the rope moved. On the surface, the line, paying out steadily, suddenly swung fast and went slack. "Ben, this is surface. We've lost tension." The radio answered with silence. He was 50 minutes into the dive, within plan, but the slack line was a serious anomaly. A standby diver suited up. The stream feeding the sinkhole grew loud and turbulent. A gentle outflow hesitated, then reversed. A powerful brown surge shoved him with shocking force. His light became a diffuse glow in a swirling cloud. He tried to turn back. The current pinned his shoulder. A sharp tear. Panic spiked. He fought to slow his breathing. He fumbled in the dark. Relief. The thin nylon line. But it was snagged on a sharp edge behind him, the current pulling one way, the taut line the other. He was trapped. Time moves fast. Air moves faster. Every diver knows the brutal equation: finite breaths, specific minutes, changing with depth and exertion. At rest, hours. Fighting a current at 100 feet, air goes ferocious. Rescuers must keep strict limits, carry extra tanks for themselves and to share if they find him. They watched gauges like hawks. They raced 3 clocks. Ben's dwindling air, their own, And the storm. Gear bought minutes, not miracles. The cave narrowed into a jet. Ben's line vanished around a corner. A beam found a low-roof alcove, just enough shelter. Signs, a small knife clipped to rock, a spare mask, a lone fin. He had been here, shedding non-essentials, squeezing on, or preparing to wait. Hope jolted the team. He was moving, he was thinking, he was fighting, just beyond, a dam of rock, mud, and branches. Water knifed through tiny gaps. They shoved with shoulders and hands. Cold seeped in. A hand over top hit solid roof. The passage was completely choked. They anchored fresh lines into the wall and planned another way. At one point, deep into the third day of the operation, two rescuers working to clear the debris dam heard a faint tapping. A metallic sound, rhythmic and deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap, tap. Not random shifting rock. A signal. A human trying to be found. They held their breath and listened. It came from the left wall. They aimed their brightest beams, swam into a narrow, bypassed side tunnel. They emerged into a small air pocket, a dome no larger than a closet. A diver huddled on a ledge above the water, exhausted and hypothermic but alive. Trapped nearly 72 hours. Main tanks gone, down to a tiny emergency bottle. Last lamp dead. He stared wide-eyed. They brought him out, slowly. Outside, in daylight, he hugged them and wept. He'd been on a separate solo dive when the flood pulse hit. He thought he'd die in the dark. He thanked them over and over. The team did not stop. A brief, muted celebration, then back in. The debris dam again, now with tools, pry bars and lift bags. A log shifted, a small opening. Beyond, calmer water. The guideline, miraculously intact, led down a sloping passage. His light fell on something on the floor. Ben's regulator, tucked under a rocky shelf as if placed there. The discovery of the regulator was a deeply ominous sign. Nearby, Ben's helmet, camera still attached, upright on the sand, almost placed. The rescuer sealed them like sacred relics, knowing what they meant. A diver does not abandon his primary life support and his helmet. On the surface, they pushed a small ROV past the bend, probing a wound with a robotic finger. Grainy images fed to a monitor. The camera showed a tight passage, the white line, rippled sand. It rounded a corner and steadied. A dark shape. A face still, like a man who had closed his eyes to sleep. The operator recoiled. A gasp rippled through the room. The rescuers faced the final truth. The search was over. It had become a recovery. News reached his family quietly, away from cameras. A small room. Photos on a table. Ben smiling on a boat, in his gear, with his dog. A note on the wall. Love, Ben. A thumb traced cave lines. They had listened to radio crackle for days, slept poorly on hard chairs. Their world stopped with the grainy image, a blurry frame no one would forget. Days passed. News spread. Brief reports, simplified headlines. A mystery, a tragic accident. Why so deep? Why the unknown passage? Why not anticipate rain? The lead rescuer pushed back at easy blame. Ben loved caves, knew the danger. Sudden, violent current can surprise the most prepared. Good gear, good procedure. Nature is stronger. The recovery took 2 more days. Technically difficult, emotionally draining. They treated him like a fallen comrade. A silent guard formed as he was carried from the water. Small offerings appeared. A wooden cross tied to a tree. Names spoken quietly past yellow tape. The sheriff closed the site. People came. Flowers. Handwritten notes. Little mementos at the rope. The shows told it with shaky pictures, flashing lights, grim faces, wetsuits on branches, rows of tanks, coils of rope, each object a silent testament. It became a case study, rules reinforced. In caves, there's no vertical escape. The way out is long and dark. Lose a guideline, stop, secure, deploy a backup to search. Low on planned air, turn back, no matter how close the discovery. And above all, respect the weather. Rain can turn calm beauty into a deadly trap with astonishing speed. Yet the lessons from Ben's death were more than rules. They were about people, about the impulse that draws someone into the dark. He loved the quiet, the sculpted rock, the piercing cold, the way a small light reveals unseen beauty. He loved the intense challenge, threading passages few would dare. The risk wasn't the point, it was the price of admission. Rescuers debriefed for hours. They tweaked kits, stronger, abrasion-resistant lines, extra high-capacity batteries. They spoke about hope, fuel for the exhausted, and its balance with clear-eyed risk. They taught students to watch the sky and the radar, showed how easily a line can snag on a sharp edge. At a quiet memorial, they told stories, laughed at a clumsy moment, cried at his generosity, and said he'd like the cave to remain secret. They tied a special knot in his memory. The cave sits under low grass and whispering pines, clear water in dry months, a rushing giant after rain. The rock keeps its shape. It does not judge. It waits. In the end, Ben's story reminds us, the dark has rules. And beauty. People will keep going in, carrying lines, lights, and hope. They'll find new corners and teach hard-won lessons. A single weathered wooden cross, tied with white nylon, marks what the earth remembers.
In the American West, the land tells a story measured in epochs. Here, beneath the quiet, sun-scorched hills of Utah County, where the shadow of the Wasatch Front stretches long in the morning light, a different world exists. Hidden from the sky, sealed within the Earth's crust, it beckons explorers. And soon, a family's night adventure will become a race against stone and time. This realm was not carved by the hands of man, but by the patient, relentless forces of geology and time. Its origins trace back to an era when superheated water, rich with dissolved minerals, was forced upward through deep fractures in the limestone bedrock. This hydrothermal activity, a violent and primordial process, created the initial voids. Then, for countless millennia, a gentler force took over. Rainwater, absorbing carbon dioxide from the air, became a weak carbonic acid. Seeping down from the surface, this water patiently dissolved the rock, molecule by molecule, widening the fractures into a complex and intricate network of passages. It is a world carved by water. Soon, one wrong turn will test its mercy. Beneath the Wasatch, water is the quiet architect. It slips through limestone like a patient whisper, dissolving seams and widening hairline cracks. Over ages, drips become chambers, trickles become corridors, and the mountain learns the language of hollow. Imagine a cathedral built not by hands, but by gravity, pressure, and time. Each mineral stain a brushstroke from the earth itself. This is the realm of Nutty Putty Cave. To cross its threshold is to leave the familiar world behind. It is a place of deep, silent darkness, a profound blackness that feels ancient and absolute. Far from the sunlit world above, its passages twist and turn like the veins of a sleeping giant, running for over 1,000 feet through the cold heart of the earth. In 2009, a simple mistake here will spark a 28-hour rescue. The air here is still, heavy, and unchanging. It is cool, maintaining a constant year-round temperature that chills the skin on contact. It carries the unique, earthy scent of damp rock, of wet clay, and of minerals that have not seen the sun in millions of years. Sound behaves differently here. Voices don't carry. They are absorbed by the stone, creating an intimate, almost muffled acoustic environment. The silence between words is a presence in itself. In this hush, your heartbeat becomes a drum. Your breath fogs the beam, sketching ghosts on stone. Clay smears like paint across gloves, and the floor yields with a soft, stubborn pull. The cave is not hostile, it is indifferent, and that indifference demands respect. For decades, this subterranean labyrinth has beckoned to the curious. Discovered in 1960 by Dale Green, its allure was immediate. It has called out to those with a spirit of adventure, promising secrets hidden in its depths, a journey into a landscape unlike any other on the planet. It offered a challenge, a physical and mental puzzle to be solved. And for many, it was an irresistible invitation to touch the raw, untamed heart of the world. But this cave holds more than geological wonders. It holds a reputation. A dual identity whispered among the tight-knit community of cavers, and spoken with grim familiarity among local rescue teams. It is known as a beginner's cave, yet it is also a place that does not easily forgive a wrong turn. Its passages are a maze, and disorientation is a constant threat. The line between a thrilling adventure and a life-threatening ordeal is perilously thin. Seasoned cavers move with choreography. 3 points of contact, measured breaths, calm voices. They read rock like a score, scallops that hint at ancient flow, polished nicks that mark the way out, a draft that promises passage. Confidence is earned in inches, and humility is non-negotiable. The cave gets its unusual name from the soft brown clay found in many of its passages, a strange viscous substance that resembles silly putty. This soft, yielding material lines a network of incredibly tight passages, adding another layer of difficulty to an already challenging environment. It shifts, it sticks, and it can make gaining purchase on the rock nearly impossible. Nutty Putty's namesake clay is a trickster. It grips boots yet slides under palm. It steals traction, then seals it. In tight bends it behaves like wet glass, turning every push into a slow, deliberate negotiation with gravity. These are not grand, open caverns designed for casual strolling. The defining characteristic of Nutty Putty is its constrictions. Choke points, squeezes that test the absolute limits of the human body and mind. These are places where the rock closes in, demanding that explorers become contortionists. Claustrophobia is not sudden here. It arrives politely. First, a shoulder brushes stone, then your chest presses the floor. Finally, the ceiling becomes a breath away. You learn to make yourself smaller, not only in body, but in thought, counting breaths, naming steps, shrinking fear to fit the passage. The passages have names that warn as much as they challenge: the Big Slide, the Scout Eater, and the most infamous of all, the ominous Birth Canal. Each is a test of courage and flexibility. They demand contortions, forcing cavers to exhale every last bit of air from their lungs, compressing their own bodies just to slide through a few more feet of unyielding rock. Progress is measured in inches, earned through strain and determination. Names in Nutty Putty carry folklore. The Big Slide polishes elbows and pride. The Scout Eater is not malicious, it simply measures readiness. And somewhere between legend and warning, every title says the same thing: proceed with care or be prepared to stay a while. In these squeezes, the rock is a constant, oppressive presence. It presses against your back, your chest, your head. The darkness is absolute, broken only by the narrow, dancing beam of a headlamp, which can create disorienting shadows and a false sense of space. The only sounds are your own ragged breathing and the scraping of fabric against stone. It is an environment that can trigger a primal, claustrophobic fear in even the most experienced explorer. Despite these dangers, or perhaps because of them, exploring Nutty Putty became a rite of passage in the region. It was a thrilling, accessible adventure for families, for scout troops, for college students looking for a weekend challenge. Its proximity to major universities and communities made it a popular destination, with thousands of visitors venturing into its depths each year. For newcomers, the cave was adventure within reach. No tickets, no turnstiles, only a gate to the underworld and the promise of a story to tell. Helmets clinked, jokes echoed, and even fear, when it surfaced, felt like part of the rite. But the cave's playful name hid a dangerous truth. The same features that made it exciting also made it treacherous. Its tight squeezes and confusing layout had a long history of trapping people. Rescues were not uncommon. Between 1999 and 2004 alone, at least 6 separate incidents required extensive search and rescue operations to extract cavers who had become stuck or lost. Each rescue was a difficult, dangerous, and resource-intensive affair, putting both the trapped individual and the rescuers at significant risk. Rescues forged a community. Volunteers trained, sheriffs drilled, and hard-won lessons spread by word of mouth. Every successful extraction felt like a handshake with the mountain, firm, risky, and unforgettable. In 2004, after 2 particularly difficult and dangerous extractions in a single week, authorities decided the risk had become unacceptable. The cave was closed to the public. A heavy steel grate was welded over the entrance, sealing the labyrinth from the outside world. The risks were deemed too great. The era of casual exploration was over. But the call of the underground is powerful. For years, the local caving community, known as grottos, lobbied for its reopening. They argued that, with proper management, the risks could be mitigated. They proposed a new system, a dedicated website, an online reservation and permit process, and a locked gate to which approved visitors would be given the combination. This would ensure that only prepared groups entered the cave, and that authorities always knew who was inside. Stewardship became the bargain. Permits, mentorship, smaller groups, and a culture that prized judgment over bravado. Reopening was never about conquering a cave. It was about earning the privilege to return safely. After 5 years of closure and intense debate, a compromise was reached. In May of 2009, with the new management systems in place, Nutty Putty reopened. The gate was unlocked. The earth, once again, invited visitors back into its embrace. That reopening, however, would be brief, only months before the events to come. When the gate reopened in 2009, hope returned with it. The community stepped lightly, listening to stone, honoring the rules, believing that caution and curiosity could share the same narrow path. Few realized the window was short. Tragedy was only months away. This story is about one such visit, just 6 months after the cave reopened. It is the story of a family outing that became a desperate battle against time and geology. It is an account of unimaginable courage in the face of impossible odds, and of the man at its center. Over the next 28 agonizing hours, we will reconstruct a rescue timeline that pushed over 100 men and women to their absolute limits. We will follow their journey deep inside the earth, into a narrow, unmapped crevice just 10 inches wide and 18 inches high, a descent from which there is no easy return. It is a story that begins not with a catastrophe, but with a simple mistake, a moment of disorientation, a single wrong turn in the dark, silent, and unforgiving corridors of Nutty Putty Cave. Before the headlines, before the hushed tones and the geological post-mortems, there was a name that belonged to a man full of life, love, and boundless promise. His name was John Edward Jones. To those who knew him, he was more than just a name. He was a presence, a warm, engaging man with an infectious laugh and a deep-seated sense of responsibility. He was the kind of person who listened more than he spoke, who made others feel seen and valued. He was 26 years old, a man balanced perfectly on the precipice of realizing his dreams. He was standing on the cusp of a bright future, one he had meticulously and passionately worked to build. A dedicated medical student at the prestigious University of Virginia, John was immersed in the demanding world of cardiac medicine. The long hours of study, the complex anatomy, the pressure of clinical rotations, he met it all with a quiet determination. For John, medicine wasn't just a career path, it was a calling. He was driven by a profound and genuine desire to help others, to heal the sick, to comfort the afflicted. His friends and professors saw in him not just a brilliant mind, but a deeply empathetic soul, destined to be a compassionate physician. But his ambitions were not confined to the hospital walls. He was also working to build a life for his growing family. He was a husband to his beloved wife, Emily. They had met in Utah and built a life together in Virginia, a partnership founded on shared faith, mutual respect, and deep affection. Theirs was a home filled with laughter and plans for the future. He was a father to their young daughter, Emma, who was the center of his world. He cherished the simple moments, reading bedtime stories, playing on the floor, seeing the world anew through her eyes. And their family was about to grow. They were expecting their second child, a son they planned to name John. A legacy of love and hope passed from one generation to the next. The anticipation was a joyful current running through their daily lives. He was a man full of life, love, and promise. A son, a brother, a friend. At 6 feet tall, with a lean, athletic build, he carried himself with an easy confidence, yet remained humble and approachable. His life was a tapestry woven with threads of ambition, devotion, and a quiet, adventurous spirit. That adventurous spirit had been nurtured from a young age. But when it came to the subterranean world, his caving experience was modest. He had explored caves as a youth with his family, but these were casual outings, not serious expeditions. They were fun, memorable trips into well-trodden tourist caves, guided by handrails and electric lights, a world away from the raw, untamed darkness of wild caving. He was an enthusiast, a hobbyist, not a seasoned professional. He didn't own specialized gear or study geological surveys. Caving was, for him, a fond memory, a nostalgic connection to his childhood in Utah. Now, returning home, he wanted a familiar thrill, a chance to step away from the pressures of medical school and reconnect with his roots. More than anything, he wanted to reconnect with his brothers. The date was set: Tuesday, November 24th, 2009. Thanksgiving was just around the corner. The holiday, a time for gratitude and reunion, had a special significance that year. John and Emily had traveled back to Utah to spend the holiday with relatives. The long drive from Virginia was a journey from their new life back to the landscapes of their past, a pilgrimage to the heart of their extended family. For John and his brothers, Josh and Jed, the holiday offered a chance to revisit a childhood adventure, to forge a new memory in a place that held old ones. They planned a trip to Nutty Putty Cave. It was a local landmark, a popular spot for amateur cavers, known for its tight squeezes and winding passages. It felt safe, familiar, the perfect setting for a pre-holiday excursion. A group of 11 friends and family gathered, a mix of ages and experience levels, all united by a shared sense of excitement. The mood was light, full of jokes and anticipation for the challenge ahead. Around 8 p.m., under a dark, cold Utah sky, they arrived at the cave entrance. The air was crisp, and the only light came from their headlamps and the distant stars. The cave's mouth was a dark, unassuming hole in the ground, breathing a cool, earthy scent. They descended one by one, headlamps cutting the blackness, their laughter and voices swallowed by the immense silence of the earth. The transition was immediate, from the open expanse of the night sky to the close, confining embrace of the rock. The plan was to find the birth canal, one of the cave's most famous and challenging features, a tight, twisting passage that explorers had to wiggle through. It was a rite of passage for visitors to Nutty Putty. Eager to lead the way, the group split up. John and his brother Josh went ahead, their beams dancing across the textured walls, searching for the familiar route. The air grew cooler as they moved deeper, a constant 55 degrees Fahrenheit. The outside world vanished completely, replaced by a primal environment of rock, shadow, and silence. Their voices echoing against ancient stone, a sound that seemed both loud and insignificant in the vast geological timeline surrounding them. They were searching for a familiar path in unfamiliar darkness. In the disorienting maze of the cave, where every passage looked like another, memory can be a treacherous guide. John spotted a narrow fissure, a tight vertical crack in the rock. It looked like the entrance he remembered, Confident in his recollection, John pushed forward into a narrow opening he believed was the birth canal. He called back to his brother, announcing he'd found it. It was a fateful error, a simple, human mistake made in the dark, hundreds of feet underground. The passage was not the birth canal. It was a different, far more dangerous feature. It was unmarked on the maps they had, unexplored by their group, and unforgivingly tight. The fissure, later nicknamed Ed's Push, was a dead end. It was a geological trap, narrowing to a mere 10 inches wide by 18 inches high. Believing the squeeze would open into a larger room below, just as the real birth canal did, John made a critical decision. He saw the tight opening not as a barrier, but as the challenge he had come for. He entered headfirst, wiggling into the angled crevice. He used his hips, his chest, and his breath to propel himself forward, exhaling to make his body smaller, a standard caving technique. He slid forward inch by inch, deeper into the earth's embrace. The rock was cold and unyielding against his body. For a moment it felt like progress. Then the rock tightened its grip. The passage did not open up. Instead, it narrowed. As he slid past a lip of rock, gravity pulled him further down the steep incline. His arms were pinned to his sides, his chest compressed. He tried to back up, but it was impossible. The angle of the passage and the friction of the rock worked against him. The earth held him fast. Every slight movement, every attempt to shift his weight, only wedged him more securely into the fissure. He was stuck. The realization dawned not with a sudden panic, but with a slow, creeping dread. The casual adventure had turned into a nightmare. John Edward Jones, the promising medical student, the loving husband and father, was trapped 150 feet underground in a space barely larger than his own body. His brother's attempts to free him were futile. The call for help went out, echoing from the depths of the cave to the world above. The 28-hour battle for his life had begun. They arrive under a cold Utah night, headlamps cutting the dark, ropes uncoiled, diagrams sketched. The assessment is swift. A near-vertical fissure, 10 by 18 inches, and a man inverted within it. Calm voices reach him first. A water tube is threaded down with care. He answers steady and polite, but the angle and the crush of stone make every breath and heartbeat a calculation. Engineers and cavers rig a complex haul, pulleys, carabiners, anchors set into fragile limestone. Mechanical advantage tightens the system. For a moment, he rises. Then rock shifts. An anchor groans, slips. Hard-won inches vanish. The lines are reset. The clock keeps moving. Medics track his strength and oxygenation in the glow of headlamps. Updates pass over radios in clipped whispers. He is tiring, but he listens. He understands. Between checks, they speak with him. They pray with him. He thanks them. Brave, lucid, grateful in the narrow dark. Through the long night, they try again and again. Inversion steals blood from his brain, starves organs of oxygen. The numbers fall. His voice fades. After approximately 28 hours underground, medical personnel pronounce him deceased. Silence follows, heavy as the stone itself. Recovery is judged too dangerous. The decision is agonizing but clear. To protect future lives, he will remain where the earth has taken him. In the days that follow, the state seals Nutty Putty Cave with concrete. The entrance becomes a memorial. Flowers, notes, a name. Remember John Edward Jones. Husband, father, son. Remember the rescuers whose courage never wavered. And remember the lesson the underworld teaches. Humility, preparation, and stewardship for all who walk beneath the mountains.